Then you guys
Well,
up
yeah,
pictures of the 365.
Yeah, that's a good
That's
sign.
more than-
Even if it's started.
Auto teach. But I just forget. No, okay. So everybody was like, I'm teaching people.
They don't use.
We used to, we used to, we used to,
Yeah.
but certain people don't, so.
I can see it.
But automatically falls.
Yeah, when you updated to 365, everyone got it. I feel like that's my thing, it's fun, and they.
Yeah, we're still waiting for.
So, yeah, we need
the
to,
other commission. So
yeah.
let's give them.
They like a slow rollout now.
Yeah.
Hello, good to see you.
Everybody
It's been a
on-
while.
We were like.
We didn't do as much anymore, but for a while, it's good to see you.
But I like came with smiles and I was like, I knew you think we could have this old outlook. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I live in Jackson. I love to, I wrote class.
Okay.
So because Kathleen needs to.
Okay, so the third one, yeah, sorry about that, just right after you have.
Oh,
After the.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. We're getting all kinds.
Oh, we are
Yeah,
too.
just go do this. It's just an idea out there.
Well, and you have to like, there are other like players who, well, they do start putting it, will come out of like, so you know.
Yeah.
So that's what we don't understand that.
Our transportation system and TSP is a planning document. And we say, we'd like connectivity. But taking that as either we own it or not, we build it, then we're always gonna say we'd like pass, but. We're not down in the weeds.
How do you see it?
Our TSP.
Come on, participant. So, we did a need survey.
Gallery.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that.
Yeah, that's the reason I came. That's the other one that we signed up.
Think about that.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, it's like really high.
Yeah, it's like really-
Maybe it's just.
Maybe you're in the car.
Yeah, no, no. It's a different time, it's exciting.
Yeah.
But. people- Well, 4 miles out of the battery, and then you're out there without it. Hey, that might be dead battery.
Okay, I just run.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't have any-
That's probably my job.
Oh, no, you're right. I think we thought it was good. I were on West Side Recreation. We were still there. So, thought there'd be a high demand for the rights. Yeah, that bridge came up.
Because you think that's what it is, the difference.
Yeah, like.
Yeah, usually
Finally in our
much
board
closer.
meetings.
I can move. If
Yeah.
you wanna sit. You wanna sit there?
Nobody's, that's really.
There's nobody engaged.
Yeah, it's nobody, and then the bridge.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Strategic location. That far away.
Okay, we're waiting a few minutes for a couple of them. So start a few minutes. It's great.
Right on.
So, yeah, so they need to.
It is nice to have those right there.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
So you
That's an
need
awesome.
times three. It is. Summertime, maybe get a little crazy.
Yeah.
You mentioned sunny day today. No, I meant when I left my house.
I actually got soup.
Oh, we're running on the train, the river down this morning. Yeah. You know, like, parts that don't get a lot of chill, like where the water pools or something like. They're quite spicy yet, but there was just fun.
Early. But I went down pretty good today. Yeah. I just don't.
Well, this is to give the auditors the ability to share their screen.
I hope you don't overly.
Fight. Like a
She slid.
surfer.
And kept it
She's got
going.
it.
Kevin or Amanda, do you want to try to share your screen and we can give you some feedback?
Yes.
In the age of like deliberate.
I'll just remind you next spring.
Yes, I know. Before I eat it though, please. Yeah, last time, after I got done consuming a unholy meal, he reminded me that it was so bad.
Disappointed.
You all set, Aaron, or do you need?
Yeah, Aaron, you good?
Yeah.
Maybe here a few minutes or?
Oh, here we go.
Can you all hear us okay? On the, okay, great.
Yes, yes. Okay, here is, good, Aaron? Let's start, okay. Okay, let's start the December 8th meeting of the Deschutes County Audit Committee. Start with introductions. Steve, will you start with you?
Steve Gunnell's district attorney.
Chuck Fably, I'm the justice of the peace. Bill Coon, treasurer.
Darrell Parrish, Public Member Audit Committee.
Nick Levi, Deschutes County administrator.
Patty Adair, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Elizabeth Page, County Auditor.
Tony Gibbon, Deschutes County.
Kristen Tony, I'm the newest member of the audit committee.
Joe Gilly,
Summer Sears, I'm a CPA and a public member. Jana Kane, controller in finance.
Robert Tintel, chief financial officer at county.
Henry Kay, Foreman's Auditor.
Angie Howard, administrative assistant. Whitney Harrell, deputy county administrator.
Eric Prop, Deputy County Administrator and I'm sorry, at 1 o'clock, I was another meeting.
Then we have some people on.
Oh, yes, I see on the screen there, yes.
Kevin Muller-Liley with Moss Adams.
Amanda McCleary Moore with Moss Adams.
Kathleen Hinman, Deschutes County HR.
Okay. I think that's everyone. All right, next submit the meeting, the minutes from the September 2nd, 2023 meeting for approval. Have a motion to approve. Those suggested comments or additions, subtractions.
Second.
I have a motion in a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. I'll abstain. I was going to be. So, okay, under special topics, the actor presented by quote from Moss Adams. Unless Elizabeth wants to read off.
So I think most of you are aware that every year the finance team produces our county financial statements, and we hire Moss Adams for the past 2 years to sort of check them over, certify them, make sure that everything's right. So Moss Adams is going to present to us on their review of the county certified financial reports.
Hi, everyone. We'll get started. Amanda, I'll go ahead and share my screen and go through the slides if that works.
Okay, great. While he is doing that, I can just do a little bit more on my introduction.
Does that look good?
Yeah, that looks good.
Great.
I'm Amanda McCleary Moore. I'm the audit partner on the audit. So I'm responsible for making sure that we're complying with all professional standards. And at the end of the day, I assign your audit reports. This is a short agenda that we have of what we're going to present today. So we'll go really through the audit process, what we looked at, our conclusions, and then we have some additional communications that we present as part of our audit. And so we'll go through those. Then we'll end with a short accounting update. By no means will we go through all the education and technical aspects of these, but just kind of let you know what's out there and on the horizon. You go to the next slide. So this is a partial team slide. So in addition to myself, Kevin Muir-Wiley is the senior manager on the job. So he helps me a lot with a technical review of the audit work that we do and overall managing the team. Ashley Austin is a partner out of our Portland office. She is not otherwise associated with the audit. She is our concurring reviewer or QC reviewer. So she does essentially an independent review of your financial statements and our audit reports at the end of the engagement just to have that independent perspective to see if everything is meeting professional standards from a GAAP and audit perspective. And then Teddy Howard is our manager. So she works closely with your team as well as Kevin and managing all of our staff and seniors to make sure that we're progressing through the audit timely and getting what we need from your team, as well as making sure our team is getting through the audit timely. Then, of course, we have a number of staff and seniors as well that were not on that slide that work on the audit and do all of the audit work. So just to quickly remind you of the services that we provide to the county, we audit the county under two sets of auditing standards. We audit them under generally accepted auditing standards, as well as the governmental auditing standards, because you do have that federal awards audit that requires that we follow governmental auditing standards. In addition to that, we also audited 5 of the county's component units as well. For the county financial statements, that bullet point number 2 there, because you do obtain the GFOA certificate, the financial statements have a number of elements that aren't otherwise required by generally accepted accounting principles, such as the statistical information and that introductory information. So as part of our review of the act for your financial statements, we do review for those elements as well. We don't express an opinion over those additional areas, but we do make sure that they're consistent with the overall act for amounts. Because you're an Oregon municipality, we also have to follow the Oregon minimum audit standards. This is an area where we're testing compliance, and for areas such as your budget, that's where we probably spend the most of our time under those auditing standards. But we, of course, audit your use of gas tax funds, as well as procurement and making sure that your investments are held in appropriate vehicles and a number of other areas that Oregon requires that we audit as part of that process. And then the last one is because you received well over $750,000 in federal awards, we audit your federal awards programs under uniform guidance and issue a report over that as well. So in addition to all of the information included in our audit reports, we also have some additional required communications. We communicate as part of planning as well as at the conclusion. So just a reminder, as part of our planning, we were able to complete the audit as according to the plan that we set forth in our planning communications. And there were no adjustments needed in order to issue our opinion over the financial statements, which a little bit of a spoiler alert there was an unmodified opinion. So as part of our audit, we thought we would high level go over some of the significant accounts that we audit and what procedures we perform over those. So for your cash and investments accounts, we confirm with third parties the balances at year end. And in addition to that, because you have a number of investments, we do look at valuation over your investments and making sure that they're appropriately disclosed in the notes. Cash and investments is an area that has a number of note disclosures, so we do review to make sure that those are complete and accurate as well. This is an area that Oregon has some compliance requirements. So as part of our auditing over cash and investments, we do look at those legal compliance requirements as well. And as part of our testing, we did not identify any issues with cash and investments. Revenue and receivables. So this is an area that can be quite complex, and our audit procedures actually, or our audit standards actually tell us this is an area where we need to spend significant amount of time. Clearly you have large revenue and receivable balances. So what we do there is we take a look at agreements, we look at cash receipts subsequent to year end, and then there are certain balances that we're able to confirm. This area is complex because you have a number of different methodologies you need to follow when recording revenue correctly. You report on, your budgetary basis, as well as modified accrual for your governmental funds, and then full accrual for the remaining funds in your government activities statements. And so we do make sure that it is being recorded appropriately in all of those areas. We found that the balances were materially correct. Kevin will have just a comment on a couple best practices around that in a little bit, but we were able to get comfortable that revenues and receivables were materially correct. Capital assets, clearly a significant account on your in your financial statements. So we test additions for the current year through looking at your capital outlay, as well as making sure we have enough coverage and testing enough of your new asset additions as part of that process. If there's significant disposals, we'll take a look at that to make sure that those are removed properly, and really the process over that as well. As part of our audit, we look at internal controls, and that is an important process with respect to your disposals, because that is something that can be missed. So really working with your departments to make sure that your disposals are correct is an important piece. So we do look at other documents such as minutes and those types of things to see if there was anything that maybe should have been disposed of that maybe didn't get recorded. And then for significant disposals, we do test that. Related to your accumulated depreciation, we do look at that as a significant estimate, and really just making sure that you're following your own policy and that you're following a consistent policy there. Long-term debt, this is your long-term liabilities. It includes a number of different types of long-term liabilities. So for any of your debt or bonds, we send out confirmations to make sure that those are correctly reflected within your financial statements. We look at payments during the year, as well as interest related to those debt balances. In addition to that, you have large pension and OPEB liabilities and other accounts associated with those liabilities. And so we do look at the valuations supported for that. We look at the inputs that go into the information provided to an actuary to make sure that those inputs are correct. And then we do take a look at assumptions to make sure that they are reasonable and consistent with what we're seeing in the marketplace with respect to those. And we were able to get comfortable that those balances were correct. In addition to testing those liabilities, we also, because you do have to allocate those liabilities across your functions, we do look at that process and make sure it's consistent year over year. Financial close and reporting. I took a quick look again at your ACFR before this call, and it looks like it hit 300 pages this year, 300 pages even, at least in PDF form. So quite, significant document for your team to put together and make sure that you are complying with all of the elements that the generally accepted accounting principles require for a county, as well as those additional GFOA reporting elements. So as part of our audit, we test that those are complete and accurate, and that they're put together. This is probably a point where we'll probably mention this at the end as well, but reviewing the county's ACFR is a pleasure. A lot of thought and work goes into putting together that document. It's very easy to review. I provided your team feedback during the audit process that it's just very easy to review, very well put together, and didn't have a lot of comments after our first review. So they do a great job at putting together that document. The next one is the federal awards. So this is where we test we test major programs. So we go through a calculation plus a risk based approach to determine what needs to be audited as part of your federal award programs. And in the current year, probably to no surprise, we audited your ARPA award. And as part of that, we did not identify any instances of non-compliance. We do look at internal controls with respect to federal awards as well. So internal controls we look at for financial reporting. We also look at your internal controls over federal compliance. And we didn't identify anything that we'll need to communicate to you today. And then the last one on the screen there is our Oregon minimum standards. So I mentioned a number of areas that we test as part of that. A common finding might be over expenditure and over appropriations for one of your budget to actual documents. And you can see on the slide there, as part of our audit of testing through procurement, your gas tax, budget, all of that, we did not have any compliance issues to report.
Next slide.
So after all of that work is done, so we come out twice. We come out for intern work, and that's when we're looking at our internal controls, and then we come out at final, and that's where we test your year-end balances and spend a few weeks auditing that, going through all of that information that I went through. That by no means is everything that we do, but we kind of wanted to give you a high-level insight to what we do as part of our audit. We issue our audit reports. So the next two slides will go over the audit reports that we issued. The first one is over the opinion on the financial statements on whether that they are reasonably stated in accordance with GAAP. And we provided unmodified or clean opinions over the county financial statements, as well as all of your component units. So congratulations there. I know that that is something that's expected of the county, but always good to compliment that you're still obtaining those clean opinions so you can have clean reports. The next one's over the Oregon minimum standards, kind of walk through this as part of our process, but if as part of our process, as I mentioned, we do look at internal controls, but we don't issue a report over the effectiveness, or we don't express an opinion over the effectiveness of internal controls. But if part of that process, we did identify something that we consider to be essentially a significant deficiency where we think an error could slip through the cracks, that we think is important enough to let you know about, or if we think that a material error could slip through cracks, or a material error did slip through the cracks, that would be something that we would identify as a material weakness. It would get included in this report, as well as any compliance findings under the Oregon minimum standards. You can see on the slide there, no control findings or compliance findings to report to you today. And then our last two reports is our governmental auditing standards report. So this one is another report that would include those internal control findings over financial reporting if we identified anything. And it additionally covers if there was some sort of compliance finding that the county has to be in compliance with that could have a material impact to the financial statements. That's something else that could potentially be included in this report. You can see on the slide there, no control findings to report, as well as no compliance findings to report. And then the last one is over your major federal programs. So this year, like I mentioned, we audited the ARPA award. While we did audit that award in the prior year, the compliance supplement that we have to follow as part of our audit procedures considers that a high risk award. So we did have to audit it again. And as part of that process, we did not identify any instances of non-compliance with the federal compliance requirements for that award, or control findings over compliance as well. So 4 very clean reports. Congratulations, you're doing a great job and everything that you need to do to stay in compliance. It's relatively rare to have no instances of some sort of compliance finding or internal control findings. So overall, just nice job. Your team does a really great job. And with that, I think I am going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to walk us through those additional communications that I had previously mentioned.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So yeah, great news. Everything was clean in terms of the report. If anyone on the committee was looking for some drama today, maybe another item on your agenda, we'll get there, but probably not this one. More great news, and I think this is really impressive. Last year, we issued the audit on, I think December 22nd or 21st, around there. And it was issued on November 30th this year. You know, some of that is on our end. A first-year audit's always going to take longer, but your team did an excellent job having everything ready for us sooner, and the ACFR was ready for us sooner. So we couldn't have done it without those gains that your team has put in place. To move it up by 3 weeks, I think is outstanding. We talked about there's 5 component units. One of those is a new component unit, the road agency. So last year you had 4, and now you have 5. So even the scope of work got a little bigger. Note 1 to the financial statements goes over the significant accounting policies. We looked over those during our review. We saw that they're consistently followed. Your revenue recognition one for governmental funds is on the 30-day basis. We're used to auditing a lot of Oregon governments that use 60 days, so we always have to have that mindset in place. But we saw that was followed, and there were no changes that are significant that we need to bring to your attention. Now, there was one new accounting standard implemented that had an impact on your financial statements. That's with GASB Statement 96 on subscription-based IT arrangements. Last year was the implementation of leases. This one's very similar, except it's getting at things that are non-tangible, like a leased equipment asset is. Instead, it's a subscription to something related to IT. And what that did was it added about $2 million in subscription assets to your balance sheet, and in turn about 1.3 million in subscription liabilities. I believe the largest one there is some software that 911 is utilizing, was the lion's share of what was added. This slide is getting at that while the numbers are often considered black and white, there are a lot of estimates involved in the ACFR, whether it's a disclosure or an allowance for a doubtful account, a discount rate that's being used, and then certainly you rely on actuaries that are doing the lion's share of the estimating when it comes to future benefits, such as other post-employment benefits and the PERS pension liability. We look at those assumptions to make sure that what's being calculated is reasonable, and we didn't have any problems with the estimates in your financial statements. Here's a listing of what we consider some of the key disclosures in that 300-page document you have. A lot of these relate to liabilities, and some of those key estimates kind of goes hand in hand with key disclosures. The last one listed here is after June 30, 2023, the county did have a debt issuance for some full faith and credit and refunding obligations, a little over $20 million, I think, and that's disclosed as a subsequent event. Wrong way. Okay, other way. Quick and easy slide. We didn't have any difficulties encountered in performing the audit this year, so good. And then a slide Amanda had kind of previewed was about the fact that there were no material adjustments that needed to be made in order to issue a clean opinion. We did identify an adjustment that was immaterial. We would have been fine if management passed, but they like to get things right, so they went ahead and booked this entry. What it was the new joint houselessness task force fund received a little over $800,000, and that was booked as revenue in the governmental funds. Those funds weren't used as of June 30, 2023, so it really should have been recorded as unearned revenue and not recognized until those funds were spent for their intended purpose. But management went ahead and recorded that adjustment, so that's reflected in your ACFR. We did have one past adjustment, which is a carryover from last year's act for, you may remember, the Road Capital Improvement Fund recognized or they received $1 million in revenue in FY22. Those funds weren't spent, but unfortunately, that wasn't really caught until we were really late in the game, and it would have been a big hassle and time waste for management to run that through. So fortunately, it wasn't material to the financial statements. We all agreed on passing on that. So now that we're in FY23, those funds still haven't been spent. So if we were to correct that entry this year, we would reduce fund balance by $1 million and record unearned revenue. But again, it's not material. So I don't recall if they're planned to be spent this coming year, but I imagine that's probably the case. This slide just talks about there's some risks and exposures, uncertainties that you disclose in your financial statements, such as legal proceedings, claims out there. Now, there's nothing big significant that needs to be disclosed. So these disclosures are really more of a general nature. If there was, a significant lawsuit that council thought was going to be a future claim that should be paid, then more disclosure would be there. But because there's nothing specific to disclose, the ACFR appropriately hits this disclosure. Happy to say we didn't have any disagreements with management. We already touched on no deficiencies in internal control, and management signed representation letters for all 6 financial statement audits without any issue before we issued our reports. We're unaware of any consultations that county officials did with other auditors, CPA firms regarding matters. Had they had those conversations, we don't want to reach out to those other accountants and see if they had a good understanding and we had an understanding of what they were talking about with the county. Under generally accepted or government auditing standards, we need to report any fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations that rise to a certain amount, and happy to say there was nothing like that. Okay, I think that's kind of the required communications. And then just a couple recommendations. You probably caught on that there was one adjustment made and then one past adjustment relating to money that was collected but not spent. So it should have actually been unearned revenue instead of recognized as revenue. So that's over the course of 2 years of testing. And I can tell you each year we probably tested over 100 transactions through a sampling. So those are pretty small errors in terms of frequency. The dollars did get close to materiality. So that's something to consider. So I know in talking with your team, they are mindful of this, and we just recommend that maybe additional controls be put in place so we don't get tripped up in the future and identify something that's material to the financial statements. The other recommendation is just more of an observation. It's nothing that requires action, but in talking with folks, we did see that the Health Benefits Fund, which is an internal service fund, has had significant declines in its fund balance over the past 4 years. So that's, I believe, fiscal years 2020 or 21, 22, and 23. And then in looking at the FY24 budget, the plan there is for it to drop some more. I've talked to your team, talked to Robert, and I understand there is a plan in place already. So happy to hear there's action being taken. We as auditors, there's nothing that we would require, but just thought it was an observation that we wanted to acknowledge today. And with that, we're to the end of our presentation where Amanda's going to talk about accounting update. And this is an awfully short slide, Amanda.
It is. It's been a little bit of time since the Gatsby's put out any more pronouncements. So these actually would have been on our slide last year as well. And there's been nothing new since then, at least that I'm aware of. So just a few new Gatsby's that your team will need to implement over the next couple years. The first one is Omnibus 2022, Gatsby statement number 99. There's really not, these are always worth reading through, as there's usually some technical corrections within there, but nothing significant that you're going to notice a significant change to your financial statements. Gatsby statement number 100 is accounting changes and errors corrections. So this is guidance for implementing any standards that may have an impact to opening balances and how to report for those. Specifically, if the standard does not tell you how to account for that. It also addresses changes or error corrections in any of your required supplementary information, which there hasn't been guidance out there before for that. So unless you have some sort of accounting change or error that you need to correct, likely won't have a significant impact to the county. That'll be effective next year. And then in 2 years from now, there's a new Gatsby standard number 101 on compensated absences. So there is already guidance out there for compensated absences. So this clarifies all of the different types of PTO type liabilities that could be out there and how to account for them, as well as some note disclosure requirements that are changing a little bit. And in my opinion, for the better. So right now you should be reporting the ins and outs of your compensated absences over the years. With the new standard, you're able to just have your change in compensated absences year over year, which is kind of nice that you don't have to specifically track and record those. If you already have a policy or procedure in order to do that, it's not highly complex, but I definitely think it will lessen the burden a little bit. And we're always hoping for those Gatsby standards that do that. And that's all we have for you as far as new accounting policies or standards that you'll have to implement over the next couple of years. Pending anything else that comes out between now and then.
Yeah, the Gatsby's did say the new chair or technical manager said under his watch there was going to be less. So far, that's been the case. We'll see if what the coming years have. I think we'll stop sharing our slides. See if there's any questions or comments this group has for us.
Questions, comments?
I just want to say thank you for your recommendations, your comment about the health benefit fund. I've said that several times in our meetings, and I appreciate that Moss Adams made the group aware of that.
Commissioner DeBone here, you got 2 out of the 3 of us in the room, but thank you very much for the partnership on this. The publishing date's always exciting. When's it going to come out? Because I mean, from my point of view, it's valuable because that's kind of the audited point in time, so we can proceed with the next year's just mindset going into the budget. We do the annual budget here, so it's very valuable. I know it's a big effort. Thank you for our team for really, no problems at all. It sounds like it's a well-oiled machine right now, but a lot of moving parts too. So thank you very much for what we're doing there. We are in a very dynamic environment, interest rates and inflation, just the cost of items, goods, services. So this is a little bit more of a narrower path, probably financially, where we're at now, where we're going to go in the near future too. So thank you for being so professional at this point in time, and we'll see where we go in the next few years. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the efficiency of the staff. Super. Getting the work time, getting us here in December rather than January.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. First, yes, thanks, Moss Adams. They have a great team. It's just interesting when they do their field work. All of a sudden, they're online one week, and the next week, boom, they have this whole group just come on board, come on site, and probably about 8 of them or so. And one day, just anecdotally, it was interesting, on Friday, they had flannel Fridays, they all had matching flannels one day, so it's just nice, funny to see. But it's great. And I would be amiss if I didn't recognize Jana Kane, our controller, and our staff. Two of our accountants are online, Dan and Lana, who contribute to this process. One of the slides that Moss Adams talked about was the new Gatsby pronouncements, how the slide was small this year, it's only 3. It's because there's been a number of years where it's been so many. And two of the biggest, some Gatsby pronouncements are, okay, no big deal, it's not a lot. But there's some really heavy ones. Gatsby 87 leases, Gatsby 96 they talked about today. I call it Sabata, but it's SPIDA, you know, SPIDA. Everyone has their own little acronym. The subscription-based IT arrangements. Those are two really big, intensive, workload-heavy pronouncements that required probably 3 additional weeks of staff time during the audit season, but also work throughout the year. So, and this work that Jenna and her team does, it's in addition to their already full, busy schedules. So they work a lot of weekends, evenings, tirelessly. So I do want to thank Jenna for all of their this year, and again, thank Moss Adams for their contributions too. Thank you.
Just the same, Jenna, to you and to the team, thank you. Extraordinary work. Makes all of our jobs so much easier. Thank you very much.
And I hope you're gonna take some time off, like the next couple of weeks.
Holidays are coming.
You deserve it. Thank you.
Just looked like everybody was really clean into their work. Anything else for Moss Adams before we let them go? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah, thank
everybody.
you. All right, bye.
Take care.
Okay, let us move on to the next item, Audit Committee 2023 accomplishments. Have a 3-page document submitted to the group.
Yeah.
We'll go over that.
So I'll just give an update to the commissioners about what the audit committee did over the past year. Again, we have 6 public members of the committee, so I'd like to thank them and recognize them. Daryl, who's been on the committee since 2016. Jody Birch is not here, but she usually comes, and we appreciate her. Joe Healy, Summer Sears, and Stan, I don't think made it this time. And then we have a new person who actually got added after I put this report together, Kristen. So welcome, Kristen. Welcome, Kristen. And then, of course, we have our 3 county positions, Patty, Chuck, and then Lee Randall, who wasn't able to attend today either. But I also want to recognize Scott, who departed last year. Or not, he departed.
Started really fast.
There we go.
What else? So the committee met 5 times this year, usually meets 4 times, but like Moss Adams said, the financial statements were issued in the middle of December. So we had our committee in January. So we got 5 meetings in this year. Daryl has been chair since 2018. We reported on prior year accomplishments last January. The committee performed a self-assessment this year. We'll be sharing the results with the committee later on in the meeting today. They reviewed the finances popular financial statement for 2022. And the county auditor did retire in 2023. And the committee assisted in recruiting a new county auditor. Moss Adams.
Thank you for joining.
Moss Adams has been our external auditor for 2 years. We have a contract with them to continue through 2026. So we have a few years off for doing that selection. The committee met with the external auditors in 2023 to look at the 2022 financial report, and also met with the external auditors in June of 2023 to talk about planning for planning for looking at the 2023 report over this year. They did hire a new internal auditor, me. They also, it's been a big year for you guys. They approved a new audit plan for us for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. So they gave me and Aaron a good work plan of projects to work on over the next 2 years. They reviewed 8 reports from the internal auditors, including the treasurer transition report, personal information data privacy, office of the district attorney transition, continuity of operation plans, finance tax controls over receipts, behavioral health practices improvements, and then 2, which we'll be presenting at this meeting today, facilities and property cash handling and the district attorney cash handling. In addition, they also reviewed 10 follow-up reports that were issued. And they also monitored our office's internal performance measures. Our internal performance measure is based on a customer satisfaction survey. For this year, they're at 95% overall satisfaction compared to 92% previous year. And they also monitored our use of time. So compared to our 5-year average, in 2023, we spent 93 hours dedicated to audit work versus 85% of our hours over our 5-year average. And we also had a big increase in hours, and a lot of that is because we added staff. We added a staff auditor in addition to just having a single person working. And there was also 96 hours devoted to non-audit work that included providing assistance to legal, comments on county finance policies, and interview panel work for selecting the new county internal. That's what the committee did this sort of.
Any comments or questions about that? There was a lot of discussion about the audit plan. Did you need a lot of changes were made? That's good. Yeah. Anything else on that? Okay, move on to the next item. We're going to move the internal audit reports up. We have that discussion until somebody has to leave. We'll move that item number 5 up of the audit committee survey results.
So Aaron is going to present on the facilities and property cash handling audit.
All right. So this is an audit that just wrapped up here in the last month. It was on our audit plan left over kind of from our fiscal year 23-24 audit work. And it was rather interesting because of a little bit of dynamic that I'll jump into here in the next slide. It's the fact that these two entities that were once whole are now separate, but they were put under our audit plan together. So it kind of provided a little bit of an interesting dynamic. And so the fairy tale version that I'll give you goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a single department that had both property and facilities. But in 2016, property management and facilities began to function as separate entities. Their budgets were formally separated in July of 2017, fiscal year 18 then. And property management was added underneath administrative services. And so this continued until property management was formally made into its own department with its own budget, July of 2023, fiscal year 24. And since they're now independent departments, for future audits, we're going to audit them separately because they do they do operate very independently. But we got agreement with both the department heads that we would, for this specific one, because we had already put it on our plan as kind of one audit of 2 entities, we would continue in that fashion just for this one last time. So we did report on them separately. So our facilities recommendation was just basically around documenting their accounting policies and procedures. The staff had a really good awareness and a really good process that they were following. They just didn't have comprehensive documentation around it. They didn't have a reconciliation process or accounts receivable process that they had documented. And so it was just one of the kind of a housekeeping piece. And if Lee was here, I would give him a bit kudos, because on the same day that we issued the report, he provided us with this full breadth of policies that he had crafted now to address this recommendation. And we've added a couple of areas down there, these little flags that are kind of aligned with our goals of the Office of County Internal Audit. And for this one, this recommendation kind of captures two of them. One is a process improvement and the other is around governance. And then to the property management recommendations, we had two recommendations, property management. Again, they had really good sense of their processes, but just didn't have the documentation to support them. They also had a little bit of a struggle because it had functioned as a two-person property management. So having that segregation of duties around cash handling was hard for them. So there was a little bit of a lack of segregation of duties because they weren't able to functionally do it, but they've since added a third person that creates that good segregation duties that we'd like to see. Additionally, property management has seen some turnover in the management area. And so the charges for filing and recording fees that had been approved in prior fiscal years, the reasoning behind that, kind of the methodology, had kind of been lost during those transitions. So they weren't really applying those fees appropriately as they could be. There's also a recent Supreme Court decision that may have an impact in that area. Basically creates the possibility that profits gained from foreclosed auctions or foreclosed property sold at auction. Some of those profits could be returned back to the original property owner instead of retained by the county as it currently is, and then distributed to its taxing districts. So the county is going to need to do a better job of tracking its costs associated with those properties in order to keep as much of our spent labor and costs as we can. So getting those those filing and reporting fees kind of documented when and why, and have it cost allocated appropriately will help them in the future. And then finally, we had a recommendation towards human resources. So part of our audit standards, we're required to ask about any existing legal issues, known fraud or conflicts of interest. And interestingly, they did have a disclosed conflict of interest right before we started this audit with a potential land sale. And the person involved acted completely ethically and disclosed it into the board and to administration and county legal. But the county's policy is a little bit contradictory in its language. It says we do not do any, if there's any conflict at all, we do not proceed. And so it kind of shuts that down and doesn't acknowledge the fact that in smaller areas like Deschutes County, those conflicts of interest can happen because population is just such that you just know folks or they're related to you in some way. So state law recognizes that it has the potential to happen. And so I think just the county policy needs to be revised to kind of align with the state standard as far as acknowledging that these things can happen and then have a good process to disclose those cases. So that was our recommendation to HR, is just around that policy, just clean it up a little bit. But any questions related to this audit? Anything? Okay. You're off the hook, Kathleen. Thank you.
Thanks. It was a surprise to have an HR audit in their cash handling, or a recommendation, but we're happy to work on that.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Bye.
Aaron, do you think you can drive for me?
I can drive for you, sure.
So, the mouse doesn't work from this far away, so that's. Aaron, it's great. The next audit we have to present is on the district attorney office, the district office of the district attorney, on their cash handling. So the mission of the office of the district attorney is to seek justice, advance public safety, and uphold the law. You can go to the next slide. Since 2019, staff expenses and revenue have all trended up. Full-time equivalent staff increased from 49.1 to 60.6 in 2023, and expenses increased from 7.9 million to 12.1 million. Personnel expenses increased faster than expenses. Next slide. So this slide shows the revenue coming into the office. Most people don't think of the district attorney as collecting revenue, but they do have some revenue coming in. Most of the non-general fund revenues you see on the bottom remain pretty steady, while discovery and documented fees actually decreased. But the big jump you see there is the grants, which increased from 161,000 in 2019 to 1.1 million in 2023. And most of that was due to criminal justice commission grant related to the emerging adult program. The document and discovery fees, which decreased from 155,000 in 2019 to 17,000 in 2023. And some of that was due to the ending of a state program that provided counties with a flat amount to pay discovery for defendants who couldn't afford to otherwise. Next slide. So our findings related to the office, where our first finding was that there were no daily deposits and no receipts. The Office of District Attorney didn't comply with the county's cash handling policy, which when it was related to some of the smaller payments like discovery. So they weren't making those deposits daily, which meant that checks were sitting around the office, and they also didn't issue pre-numbered receipts, which made it easier to dispute transactions. And these were actually longstanding issues within the office. We've had findings since 2009, actually, this has been on our audit list. Next slide. Some of the reason that these things that this might not have been a priority for the office is that we're talking about pretty small amounts in the general scheme of what the office works on, and also infrequent. So this isn't money that's coming in regularly at any one time. It comes in sporadically, and it comes in pretty small amounts. And in some ways that makes it seem low risk, but on the other hand, also that unpredictable nature and the ability to fly under the radar makes this a good opportunity for fraud. So we made recommendations to the office saying that they should update their accounting procedures to comply with the county's cash handling policy to decrease the chance that cash was stolen. They were also very proactive in getting these recommendations adopted. So we've already got their procedures, and I think Aaron's going to talk about it when we do the follow-up. We're not even going to need to follow up with the district attorney's office this report because everything's done. That's it for that report.
I see there's a follow-up. We discussed the other side of it.
Yep, they did it quickly enough, and there was another follow-up in their office, so we just put them all together.
Anything else on that?
You're also off the hook.
Thank you.
So, how do we do follow-ups before we do the survey and update them?
So Aaron's got the follow-ups.
Makes sense. I think.
Where am I? Seeing it. Thank you, Steve. It's still really laggy today. Apologize. Apologize for the delay, everybody.
You did it, Siobhan.
You can just,
You're frozen.
yeah, it's just really laggy today. It's, I don't know if you got it. Maybe there's a solar flare that we don't know about. So as you can see, a lot of follow-ups, this quarter, they all kind of hit at once and, we did a few, or at least one, we did it a little bit in advance. The treasurer transition, we did a little bit quicker. I think we asked at 6 months or 7 months, I think it had been. So, so it was a little bit, on a quicker timeline, and that was to try to get it in, kind of before the deadline of our global audit, global follow-up audit. 'Cause I know Bill had done quite a bit of work already on that, so figured might as well just get an update from him. And like Elizabeth alluded to, the district attorney was very proactive in getting responses to us, addressing his cash handling recommendation. And there was also some cash handling items left over in the district attorney transition that I'll get to, but so those were kind of a combined follow-up that was kind of unique. That we'll just kind of do it once, but yeah, a lot of follow-up this quarter. So the sheriff's office, they had 3 major recommendations on their report with 14 resolution guidance points. And each of those major recommendations still has at least one guidance point that is still underway. And the sheriff's office has indicated actually this month of this year, estimated completion date for those the additional little guidance points to call us all the way complete. So we'll check in with him during our global for next year to ensure that those have gotten completed, unless he wants to provide us some in advance. We always love and pay. As far as for the follow-up for vacation and sick leave, that audit had 10 original recommendations agreed to by HR and finance. Both of these parties were heavily involved in the pay period alignment project that occurred during the time of the report and went effective April 1st. So one recommendation towards the secondary review process for leave out calculations and adjustment was deferred because of that large project that they had already committed to. So there was a little delay in that one. 5 of the other recommendations have been resolved and the remaining 4 are currently underway. So Kathleen probably could have spoke to this, but they're basically surrounding the CBA bargaining and the policy language in there to align the current practice for vacation and sick leave within those CBAs to make sure that practice is aligned with the policy. And so those are regularly occurring bargaining agreements each spring. So they're addressing those as they come up. Performance evaluation updates are working its way through our committee. And I've seen the model. It's got noticeable improvements over our current performance evaluation standard. And then HR policies 16 is drafted and presented to the board in the coming months. So those are the underway status updates. Any questions on follow-up for vacation sick leave or sheriff's office that we're going to ask? And again, go into the office of district attorney. So this was combined follow-up. There was one recommendation that they addressed right off the bat with their cash handling, and 5 recommendations from the transition audit that they had addressed. The only one that's still underway is to document their kind of daily activities to provide a succession plan in case the day comes when Steve decides to leave or he gets not reelected. So they're just doing that as kind of a continuous effort. So it's underway, but not to a point where we could call it completed yet. And then finally, the treasurer transition, all those 7 recommendations that were given to the treasurer have all been resolved. Again, point to Bill's efforts, we asked for these updates a little bit ahead of our typical 9-month schedule, so applaud him for being active in addressing those recommendations.
We'll be a one-man shop. You really-
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Send a high bar for some of these other ones. So, yeah, we got a lot done. Pretty impressive. So, anything on the follow-ups, questions? No questions? Great.
For the following, anyone need a 5-minute break? Or we get into the survey or just go for it? Sure, how long? Go for it. Okay, fine with me. All right. Okay,
The survey?
so let us go back to the audit committee survey
So,
results.
like we talked about, at the last meeting, I sent out a, survey to all the committee members. Got your responses back and ready to report out, what the feedback, that you have, your service on the committee. So the reason we survey is, to hopefully have a more meaningful experience for the committee members and also to improve effectiveness of the committee. The survey, which was not, maybe go down to the third slide.
Well, I gotta share the screen first.
Oh, okay. I'll just,
Zoom is
it's going slow today.
Zoom is really not helping. No, that's not it. Sorry.
Aaron, when you mentioned solar flares, I mean, that's interesting, just processing what you said there, because I mean, space-based internet things, I mean, that could be the next generation of issue.
I mean, it really does impact electronics in a greater degree than most people think. There it is. Okay.
So the survey has 46 questions. So everyone who responded did a lot of work for us. Divided into 6 sections. Looking at processes and procedures, understanding risk. You can go back.
That one?
Yep.
Okay.
Understanding risk, the composition and quality of the committee, communications, oversight over financial reporting, and oversight over internal audit functions. Those 46 questions ask respondents to rate whether they strongly disagree or strongly agree based on a 5-point scale. We had 5 responses. So these are just the overall results, the averages in each of those sections. Processes and procedures had the highest average score for 0.18, and audit oversight over internal audit had the lowest score at 3.6. So this is sort of how those scores are changing over time, broken down by category on the left side, and then the overall average on the right side. The scores are still higher than they were when we first did the survey in 2005, but have been decreasing since 2017. So now I can go into some of those areas, some of the sub-areas a little more. So on the policies and procedures, this was asking about these were topics that the questions asked about. Reports to boards of commissioners, dedicated sufficient time and resources for the committee, developing a calendar for the committee, voting open dialogue amongst committee members, that the materials the committee receives are appropriate, things like that. This was the highest rating and it's been relatively flat over the past few years. The next slide shows where things have changed the most over the past 2 years, or the past time we did a survey. So the biggest changes and how items on the list change from 2020 to 2022, and I just highlighted the one question you see with the biggest increase was that the committee dedicates sufficient time and resources to its work, and the biggest decrease there was that the committee encourages input on meeting agendas, and that one did include a disagree rating. Oh, and I should also mention that I also have given you all more details in the email that I sent, and there's copies over here that have all the scores over years for each of the questions and any comments that we received. So on understanding risks, there were actually only 2 statements on this one. That the committee understands the pressures that may impact the quality of financial statements, and that the committee understands significant risks to the county, including processes to identify risk. And the next slide, that you can see how those changed during the past, from the past survey. Next section is on composition and quality of the committee. So this one talks about nominations, qualifications, diversity of experience over committee members, succession plans and new committee orientation, the scores over time here at the top. Next slide, you can see how scores individually changed since the last time, and I've highlighted some of the bigger changes. We saw a drop in reviewing the charter annually, a drop in that the committee receives continuing education, and an increase in that the committee has a succession plan. And then the one at the top, one increasing at the top, was that the committee acts independently. So that's where the committee felt strongest. There was one disagree on that the committee receives continuing education. So on communication, so this is how the committee both communicates with the board and also with management and amongst each other. So the committee is setting a tone at the top, that members have open lines of communication, but also information coming back to the committee, that the committee is made aware of alleged violations, that management makes the committee aware of alleged violations, and also that the committee periodically visits locations around the county to sort of see things and how things are working in person.
We used to do that with the COVID plan.
Yeah.
Torpedo that at least period of a couple of years.
Yeah. I think I heard that you went to IT.
IT was our last visit.
Yeah.
But I know in the past, I think you guys have gone the road, good part of jail, jail, CDD, I think. Yeah, those are the best ones.
If anybody's interested in something, or, I mean, I'll join too. Or, I mean, I'm just thinking if there's an individual who wants to talk about something. Cause that, I mean, that's the goal of myself too, is just get out to a department sometime, just spend a little simple amount of time with somebody.
I think
Solid waste, so we went to solid.
I think it's definitely something we can organize. Okay, get that happening again.
I think it'd be.
Yeah, I'd enjoy it too.
We just went to the jail. Yeah. And I got special credit this time.
Oh, you got credit for time served.
Patty was in jail.
Oh,
I misheard.
we're gonna talk later. Anyway, it is amazing, but I spent like 3 hours in the jail when I did county college as extra credit because I wasn't gonna be able to graduate if I didn't have extra credit, so. And it's a really, it's an amazing feeling with those doors locked.
Well, having recently gone through county college, I have an appreciation for being able to go out to each one of our departments
Yes.
and actually hear from folks on the ground as to what they're focused on and what the issues are. So again, maybe something similar to that, maybe in a much condensed version, but I think it was really helpful for me being new to the county and not having contact with senior department managers, but that next level down and hearing from them as to know what's going on.
Yeah, I think Daryl's right that it was COVID that kind of
Yeah.
disrupted that, so I can start having.
I think it would be great to bring it back.
Yeah.
That is really the most interesting part about being an interim audit within this county is we get to go all these really neat places, learn about them. And to be able to provide that to the community too, I think it's a great benefit.
Kind of an aspect of continuing education too. I mean, it's not your standard seminar conference, but you learn a lot about the organization, different operating functions of it. So I address that issue too. So anyway, I don't mean to steal your thunder.
No, I think when we get to the end, yeah, I think we, as the committee needs to get together and think about what are the things we want, where are the areas we want to work on improvements and what can we change as a committee in order to make sure we're all getting a lot more out of this, so. But going back to communication, the score on cooperative relationships is the high one. And then the two ones that decreased where it's getting timely information and visiting locations. And those both included disagree ratings. This section is questions related to oversight over financial reporting. So these are the financial reports that Jana and the finance team put together. So does the committee consider, or I think, yeah, does the committee consider quality, including disclosures when reviewing the financial statements? Is the committee consulted when management seeks a second opinion, which I think hasn't happened, so that one's a little big. I can consult it all. No, when you can consult the committee. Yeah, if you the committee should be consulted if you're going away from our auditors and seeking a second opinion.
Oh, gotcha.
That the committee knows about the experience and sufficiency of finance and audit staff. That the committee ensures resolution of recommendations. So these are the next slide shows the changes in those areas. The yellow one's hard to see, but that's your opinion of the quality of the financial reports. The green line is that the committee reviews accounting policy. The dark blue is asking about experience of staff, and the light blue is that the committee reviews internal controls at the county. The highest one there at the top is that the committee reviews management action plans, and the lowest one is the one Jana brought up about that the committee is consulted when management seeks a second opinion. I think that hasn't happened, so that might be why one's low. But all of these statements included disagree. And then the last one is the committee's oversight over the internal audit function. So your oversight over the work that Aaron and I do. The committee understands the coordination between the internal and external auditor. That the committee participates in selection and oversight of the external audit. That the committee reviews management representation letters. That the committee reviews fees paid to the external auditor. And this is the one that had the biggest overall drop since 2020. And you can see how these scores changed one, the dark blue one there is that the committee reviews external auditor fees. One where the committee is made aware of non-audit services. The committee reviews management representation letters, and that the committee is aware of coordination between the external auditors. And then I also just wanted to share some of the comments that came out. So on policies and procedures, these are some of the comments. Policies and procedures. I generally see an agenda distributed, but I don't remember being asked for input. We're getting better at promoting open dialogue. That there hasn't been material violation of laws or breaches of fiduciary duties. But no doubt that the committee would be made aware of those things. Understanding risks. It's likely that most of the committee are not truly aware of the pressures on management. And that risk is often discussed at committee meetings in the presence of audit staff and county management. Composition and quality of committee, no formal continuing education process. Also, though, kudos for Aaron doing a great job.
Aaron, write that one.
Yeah.
You deserve that, right?
A question about how members are really found and wanting to know more about how committee members are selected. And someone not aware of a formal succession plan for committee members, but that vacancies have historically been minimized. And then on communication, that internal audit has a good tone at the top, but not sure, does a good job of promoting tone at the top, but not sure about the county committee, and that the person would be interested to hear the county administrator's thoughts about tone at the top. Consider providing quicker communication between the audit committee with relevant press releases and not just talking about management updates at meetings. This one talks about those field trips that there had been meetings at some county locations, including the landfill and the jail. I really like this aspect of our meetings, but then another person saying, I don't remember being on any visits. So I think that reflects that we haven't done that one.
I don't remember ever doing it, actually. I've been here, I just got my 5-year letter, so.
I just don't understand what the jail, the landfill,
I could go to the Fair Expo, you know, they're all really interesting though.
like, there's gotta be some other places to visit.
Our operations may not be as pretty as yours.
Yeah.
Oversight over financial reporting. Someone saying that to their knowledge, the committee has not performed a comprehensive review of internal controls. Either there have been no policy changes or they haven't been presented to the committee. And then asking the external auditors to review prior year recommendations with the committee. I think the external auditors would do that. And that means that all the recommendations were closed.
And I'll just jump in real quick. I'll add, we're finance obviously is happy to talk to the community, talk about internal controls. But as the auditors mentioned today, they thoroughly go over the internal controls every year during the audit as well. But we're happy to have any discussions at any point.
They will report that to us and do it. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what we would get is through.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
and they
if-
referenced it today, right?
But if the committee wanted to do more and have more
Yep.
knowledge, I'm sure.
Yep, we're welcome.
Would you mind if Robert shares with this group about our bonding for the courthouse? How proud I am that we actually did so well, and you share that story so great. I don't know, I don't know if everybody in the room knows how well we did, but if you could share that, I
Yeah.
think that would, because what you do here is really appreciated. I know we met 5 times this year or something. It's incredibly appreciated, but there's a reason why we are so careful with our finances, and I think Robert has a story.
And do you want me to give it now, Chair, or I can wait till you get through the presentation and it's updated?
Are we almost
on
done?
refunding?
Go ahead. I wouldn't mind.
Okay, little impromptu, I don't have all the specific numbers in front of me now from when I presented the first time. But we recently just, a couple weeks ago, actually on the,
November 13th.
yeah, we had our bid. We went out for a competitive bid for our bond. It's about $25 million total, 20.5 million for our courthouse expansion project, and then we refunded our 2013 bonds. What was really interesting, we've had this plan, we've talked with the Board of County Commissioners, and they approved it over a number of months ago, quite a few months, from the planning, because it takes a while when you go for planning and going out there. We have to get a bond rating with our Moody's Investor Services law. So everything just takes a lot of time. When we first started talking about this process and even expanding the courthouse, we budgeted in the current fiscal year, because it was a way out. The rate we were budgeting for was 5.07%, and we were expecting about $3.2 million annual debt service payments because of the courthouse project. A lot of things transpired from that time. One of the best things was the state of Oregon, through a lot of work, donated. They're giving us, granted us, thank you, from their general fund, $15 million towards the courthouse project. And we're still working through that contract with OJD, Oregon Justice Department. However, there's a commitment from the state legislatures to give us $15 million. So we were able to buy down that debt of the 20.5 for the court. Started at 40.5 million, let's start with that. But we got $15 million from the state, or will receive, and then the Board of County Commissioners and the Budget Committee also committed $5 million of funds that we have on hand. Of $4 million from local assistance travel consistency funds, which is part of ARPA, and then 400,000 of interest. So that brought down another 5 million. So we got 20 million. So it went from 40.5 to 20.5. Okay, so that's the funding source, or what we need for that. As I mentioned, start out 5.075 interest rate and the $3 million. Well, then we bought down the debt, and so we knew that the rate would go down, the debt service payments. Well, then rates started going up in the market. They kept going up, and we're like, oh no. So it was probably within 3 weeks before we were going for that bid, the competitive bid opening, the financial advisors called me and said rates have gone up. That refunding we were going to do, 2013 bond refunding, it's like refinancing your house. So you want to refinance, get a lower rate, you save money. Well, interest rates have gone up, so we need to take that out. So we adjusted all of our bond documents, took it out, and moved forward. And so we're like, okay, we're not going to move forward, and we thought the rates would maybe be 4.5%. When I went to the board at one time, we thought it might be about 3.89 or so %, but then rates continue to go up. Well, sorry to make this a longer story. I'm so excited. Get it closer. And so finally, 2 days before closing, I think it was 2 or 3 days before the competitive bid, there was a change in the market. If you might recall, just a few weeks ago, they came out with the new latest inflation data and other data, and everyone thought, oh, everything's solved. So for just a few days, that week, the rates actually decreased. And so our financial advisor called me and said, you know what? I think we could do that bond again, do the refinancing of our 2013 debt. So let's throw it back in there. So last minute, we did all this work again, worked with bond counsel, bond attorneys, put all that information back in the official statement, did an addendum for that. Anyway, so then we get to now 2 days later, and we get to the competitive bid opening, and Bill was there as well, and Jana was involved in this process too. So it's really interesting if anyone's been involved in how you do competitive bid openings. It's all online. You're just online, but you see these banks, financial institutions. They place a bid for your items, and it'll just show up. It'll have their name, and it'll have the interest rate that they're going to give you. Well, we had, I think it was 17 interested companies, banks that put a competitive bid on there. Our financial advisor is Kip and Duncan Brown said, this is the most he's ever seen for having interest in a governmental bonds going out there. But because of the quality of Deschutes County and the ratings, we have an AA1 rating, which is excellent. It's not AAA, but it's AA1. It's great for our county. So he said it was the most he's ever seen. And of the 17 bids, all of them were 1.1 basis points away. The second one was only 1.1 basis points away, which when you look at it, well, I should say, so the rate ended up being the composite rate 3.86. So we got a 3.86 rate. We first estimated the financial advisors, right? 5.075. The day of it, I asked our advisors, what do you think we're going to get? And they're like, well, I think 4. And so I'm like, okay, I'd be happy with 4 because at one time we were like 4.5. We thought, anyway, it ended up being 3.86 for the combined between the refunding and the courthouse. Courthouse portion ended up being 3.93, and the refunding a little lower because they had some interest earnings in that. But it ended up being a great rate, so we're very excited about that process. And so that saved us $100,000 a year just by that rate decrease, just caught it at the right time. And then the market went up a little bit. Now since then, market's gone, it's all over the board too. But timing was everything. So we were just, Bill and I were really pleased that day. And so it was a great outcome, and it was a great story.
Great story. Thank you so much.
I was more succinct before when I had my notes in front of me.
I love the story because that tells you we are really, it's been going on for a while, and thank you, Jenna, and your team and everybody that works so hard, but it really does make a difference. You just saved 100,000 a year.
Moody's really complimented the county. Things that we will continue to stress are reserves that we have, strong financial management, conservative budgeting approach. Those are really the 3 things that they highlighted. And of course, part of the other factors are outside of our control, kind of demographics, the economic development of the city, of the county area as well. And there's some strong data in that area. But the things that are within our control, we're doing really well.
What I was interested in, diversified economy and payroll. Or, it's very tangible when it comes to stuff like this.
Thank you for letting us add that to the agenda.
Wasn't that a great story, Joe?
Great story. I think everything.
Oh, yeah.
Back to the survey.
Sorry.
There's only one more page of comments, oversight of the audit committee, or oversight of the audit function. I don't remember ever having discussed the fees to the auditor, or non-audit services. That the committee was involved with appointing the external audit. And I think this one was related to having oversight over the internal auditor, saying that the board or administrator chose the reporting structure, the auditor's reporting structure enough. So what I would like to ask you all is to take this spreadsheet back, and come to the March meeting with ideas of anything that you want to change. If there are areas of the self-assessment survey that you think you want to see improvements on at the committee, bring those back. Or if there are areas that you think, I don't really care about that one at all, let's ignore it. It could go down to 0 if you care. So that would be great. And then I can also answer any questions.
I have a question. I remember Summer and I were talking about, I think you and I, if I remember correctly, wanted to go with Moss Adams. We just thought it was a good time to change, but what is happening in that world? Are more CPA firms pulling out of doing auditing? Is that what, but Moss Adams is still pretty strong into like government auditing.
They're very strong, strongest in the state.
Right. Because our firm was from Idaho.
It's such a specialized niche, there's always these niches, and government auditing is way different than private sector accounting. And so once they have trained people, you have to staff up a strong team for that.
They're also big ones are buying smaller ones right now. It's been a bit trend, but you're not finding those smaller local government auditors anymore. looking that up. But yeah, you have to have the ability to do those audits, meeting public standards, sometimes expensive. And audits don't rake in as much money as the private sector.
Who was the last auditor?
I Bailey,
Out of Boise,
I Bailey,
There.
they're also huge.
Yeah, they're,
but hadn't they been here for like 8 years or something? I mean, it seemed like it was a long time, and aren't you supposed to change auditors? That's what I was.
But it was Price Front before that, which was local, they are local. So, yeah, they are.
this,
I don't know, but that was before
I know that the changing auditors thing kind of was a big deal after the city of Bell scandal in California. But I think it,
well, that was after the whole
It
inland
was-
clash, the rules changed for the publicly traded company. They
People
have to
change
trade.
the company, so that helps.
Yeah.
You get different managers, different, there's turnover,
and fresh.
there's very fresh eyes.
I know Gibbons was really surprised there were only 2 bids.
One was like Bailey,
Yeah.
right? That was just- yes.
I will say that I came from City of Portland and we only had 2 bids, which were Los Angeles and I Bailey. So
Really? Okay.
And coming, I'll just mention, City of Eugene's experience. I was at Lake County, but talking with them, when they went out for audit services, they only got 1 bid. So the 1 bid is all they got. So yeah, there aren't a lot of, especially for larger organizations, there aren't a lot of companies that can do that, and then some others just don't have interest.
And if you talk with the Secretary of State's office, they're the ones who file and require the reports to be submitted. They have a really substantial delinquent filers list. Several organizations on that list, probably half of them cannot file audited financial statements because they do RFPs and get no response. So it's this weird dynamic that's happening in the industry. And the Secretary of State's office did just help us push through some legislation to tweak some of the rules that may make some of that easier while still ensuring transparency and accountability. So we'll see how that plays out.
So from this discussion, I get the impression that the public members of the committee do have a background in auditing. Is that right? Because I know that there's 2 separate floors on
I have some,
the World Trade Center.
I have some in the last 15 years of my career, I was doing something totally different. I don't.
Sure, you know, a layman would just say, well, you're an accountant, so you do all that. So I'm glad. It makes, you know, it gives me more comfort because if something went wrong, it'd be more than embarrassing, because we're the audit companies. And so I take comfort in the fact that you guys didn't have a lot of questions. I imagine though that you would feel very comfortable if you could provide any input that you thought was appropriate, and that sort of thing. And if you wanted to talk to the auditor privately, not staff. Thank you.
I really like the idea about coming back with thoughts of something that survey and just time to digest it, and kind of go through it ourselves and then bring it to the body. After some thought.
Well, that one comment about, you know, who runs the audit committee, revenue concept was there. I mean, it is in county code, and that's why talk about the code review. It's at least an opportunity to look at how this is structured. It's a choice for the county to have auditing services, having an audit committee, but it is independent. You have authority to look at whatever you want and hire an auditor.
And I think it wasn't too long ago that there were some code changes made by the committee.
Yeah, there's been
22.
But if you just pull out that chapter and looking at it. So.
Okay, anything else to bring this back up again in March, but anything else? Survey?
Is there anything, does anyone have any ideas on how we can get more participation, able to complete the survey? So you said on the 4,
5, yeah.
5 out of
That's 1, 8.
Yeah.
That's a time.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, we should have 8. Should have 8.
Not trying to put anyone on the spot, it's just
Yeah,
thinking
I
about,
think it's really important.
maybe it's a question of, are there things we could do differently about the actual survey itself?
I think the survey is very, and I think there may be questions that are not relevant to our budgets. It's, I think it's put out, the IIA, the International Institute of Internal Auditors, thank you. Puts it out, and so I don't know that all of these questions are relevant, or you all feel that they're, you know, important to you. So I think, you know, thinking about, are there questions we don't want to ask anyone, would also be something to think about. All right, so the next thing is the GAGIS presentation. So one of the things we do to try to promote continuing education for the committee members is to, we've been going through the government auditing standards to let you all know about the standards that Aaron and I follow when we do performance auditing. I think last time you presented on continuing education for auditors, and
Yeah, the CPE, or then, I don't recall what the other areas. Yeah, just work plan and 6, I think.
Haven't changed the year, but
Yeah, we're still on
follow through with this one.
Thank you, Tom.
Good to see you.
but today we'll talk about chapter 8, which is the fieldwork standards for so this is really the bulk of, it's actually the bulk of those auditing standards, and it's the bulk of what we do, how we perform our field work. The chapter includes, well, there are other chapters that include different standards for work. So the financial audits are in chapter 6, and those are, that's what Moss Adams does. Sort of the classic audit, they're looking at governmental financial statements. They're looking at GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. A lot of the so this chapter is actually a lot shorter than the chapter that applies to us, and that's because a lot of the standards they have to follow are already covered in accounting standards in AICP. So that section is about 15 pages, and Aaron and I don't know anything about it. You have to be a CPA in order to do it, so we just
To even read it.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Another section, chapter 7, is about attestation engagements and review. These are kind of, this is a confusing section to me. I'm not really sure what this is for. I think this is for also CPAs who are doing things that are not financial audits.
Yeah, it's like a lower level of assurance that.
Yes. So it's defined in GAGIS as evaluating how true data is when compared to a stated purpose. And that has about 24 pages. We don't do those either. That you also need to be a CPA.
I'll just add that Moss Adams also put some function for us with this.
Refund procedures.
So
That's those two. AUPs they do.
So this is what we do. We do what's in chapter 8, which is a performance audit, and it sort of says you can look at anything else, use any other criteria to conduct an audit. So rather than looking at financial rules and accounting standards, we're looking at criteria such as laws, contracts, grant agreements, standards, measures, expected performance, benchmarks. It's divided into 2 chapters, one on fieldwork standards and one on reporting standards. And we'll talk about chapter 9 the next, which is reporting standards, in our next presentation in March. But today we're going to focus on those fieldwork standards. So this is an overview of how the fieldwork standards are divided up into sections on planning and audit, conducting an engagement, on supervision, on how to collect evidence and evaluate evidence, on how to develop findings, and then what kind of documentation is required within an audit. So the purpose of planning is to develop audit objectives. So auditors identify subject matter and performance aspects to include in the audit. And the objectives are questions about the program which we seek to answer through evidence weighted against criteria. We use that time to develop methods which define the audit procedures we'll use to gather and analyze evidence. Audit methods, when we develop them, we always have to consider that we should be capable of generating sufficient and appropriate evidence in order to draw conclusions. We have to communicate the objectives with management, the methods and our scope before starting an audit. And then whenever communication with management is expected throughout the audit, and there can be changes to the scope and objectives, but those have to be communicated to management, and there should be no surprises to management during the audit process. We're required to ask about any open investigations or legal proceedings in order to avoid any interference with those events. We have to ask whether the audit, or auditee, the organization, has acted upon any previous recommendations that are related to our objective. Those might be recommendations from external auditors, consultants, or previous recommendations from our own audit shop. And then we need to consider who we assign to the audit. Those people need to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to complete the audit. We also need to budget and make sure that we have enough auditors assigned and enough hours assigned to complete the audit. And then finally, we have to prepare a written audit plan outlining what we intend to do during the audit, our objective, scope, and methods, though we can modify that plan if we need to during the audit. The next section is about what we need to do while we're conducting the engagement. The standards give us guidance for how we should collect evidence that will allow us to achieve our objectives. We are supposed to collect evidence describing the general nature of the program, including topics like who the users are, the strategic plan of the organization, any relevant risks, the overall size of the program, looking at things like how much dollars are spent, how many customers are served, and any trends or changes in time. We also look at internal control during this time. I think we heard talk about internal control during the survey, and looking at finances and internal controls. It's kind of a jargony technical term that auditors tend to over rely on, but internal controls are really just a business practice that can keep an organization on track. They can include practices such as making sure two people sign off on a transaction, something so specific that a specific transaction requires 2 sign-offs, or they can be really broad, such as you need to have a good tone at the top. I think the internal controls can be kind of a rabbit hole. Like once you start going down that, you can just keep going down it, and there's always another internal control you can look at. So auditors really need to think about what are the risks and grounding our review of internal controls and what really matters and what risks there are to the organization. A lot of times these missing or failing internal controls are what lead to our audit recommendations. The standards also tell us to look at information system controls, ensuring that any data that's generated out of information systems is reliable. We also are encouraged to look at provisions of law, contracts or grants as criteria to use. We also have to look for instances or be aware of any instances of fraud. We're not necessarily fraud investigators, and we don't have the ultimate requirement to, or the ultimate responsibility to look for fraud, but it's something we need to be aware of. If we observe it during the course of our audit, we need to report on it. We've already talked about evidence. And then the last thing is that the standards talk about using the work of others. And so if we use work of other auditors, we need to make sure that they are complying with standards and that we've reviewed their peer reviews and make sure that their quality assurance programs are reliable. The third section is about supervision, and it's not as in-depth as the previous one, but these standards really want us to make sure that every audit is properly supervised. The supervisor's role has to be documented in our audit files and work papers. The supervisor's job is to provide guidance to auditors to stay informed at a high level about what's going on in the audit, to review work for accuracy, and also to offer on-the-job training. The fourth section talks about evidence as well, and lets us know what constitutes sufficient and appropriate evidence. When field work concludes, auditors go back to the original objectives and methods to make sure that they've gathered enough evidence, and then perform an overall assessment of evidence to say, yes, this body of work has enough evidence that we've achieved our objectives. If we get to that point and we determine we don't have enough evidence to achieve our objectives, we have to keep working and go out and do more to gather more sufficient evidence. The fifth section is about findings. So auditors make findings when they find instances of non-compliance. But unlike financial auditors who only make findings for instances of non-compliance, performance auditors can also make findings related to waste and abuse. According to the standards, waste is the act of using or expending resources carelessly, extravagantly, or to no purpose. Importantly, waste can include activities that do not include abuse and do not necessarily involve a violation of law. Rather, waste relates primarily to mismanagement, inappropriate action, and inadequate oversight. And so this section gives us a lot more leeway in what we want to comment on that maybe a financial auditor wouldn't have a leeway to comment on. So that's sort of the power that comes with following the standards in this chapter, but also why this chapter is so prescriptive and precise about how we really need to have very good evidence in order to make those determinations. There are 4 elements to a finding. Criteria, which is the standard by which a program should be operating. Condition. Condition is an assessment of whether or not the program is performing according to that criteria. The cause is the difference between the criteria and the condition, and the cause often leads to a recommendation. And the effect is what gives meaning to the finding. It's why we should care that this is happening. And the last set of standards are related to audit documentation. The report that we share with the committee is really just a part of our work product. In fact, all of the supporting evidence is all indexed and organized in a way that anyone who wanted to look at a report can go back and look at all of the documentation that we have to back up any statement within our report. So all of that we keep organized in a program called Auto Audit that allows us to put links from statements in our report back to back to supporting documentation. So it'll go back to supporting documentation that might be work that we perform, calculations in Excel, or, you know, a summary report or something where we say, here's the information we saw, these are the conclusions we're drawing from it. And then even further back into the supporting documentation, going back to the raw reports that we pulled out of financial systems. We make ourselves and our documents available to anyone who wants to review our work or ask questions. That is the end of chapter 8. Does anyone have any questions about that or how it applies to our work?
I just have an interesting side note. So based on my prior work with the tribes that I did through casino auditing, they did not like the term engagement. It was too conflicting for them. It sounded too much like war, so we can never call our audits engagements. And we always just called them compliance reviews, which sounds worse in my opinion, but we could never engage with them. So yeah, right. It was just an interesting, you know, little reflection of their history and their culture.
Okay. So the things we don't do, is there any need to do those, or is there any someone to do those?
Well, I think we have the external auditors doing those.
Yeah.
So I think
That makes sense. Okay, anything else? Len?
No.
All right. General follow-up, department updates.
So we have the internal auditor status report here. So we're doing status update from October 2023 through October or August 2023 through October 2023. We issued some reports, including the behavioral health practices improvement report. We have a couple of reports in process. I'm working on a report of equity of wages and benefits, and Erin is working on an audit of overtime and compensatory time, which actually you released your report to management right now. You're getting comments back.
I'm a discussion draft.
Your discussion draft.
Discussion draft,
Yeah.
so not informal,
Right.
not formal comments yet.
Formal comments, but feedback.
Yes.
Back. Yeah. And then we have also a fair and expo cash handling, which is also pretty close where we've ended field work on that for that one. We didn't do any non-audit work. We have follow-up work, which Erin went over earlier, sheriff's office cash handling, vacation and sick leave, the treasurer transition, elected district attorney transition, and the district attorney cash handling. We've done some meetings with county administration, and also reviewed some internal processes, policies, things like that. We've had minimal supervision issues. We both attended the Oregon Audit Summit for 2 days in October, and met with a bunch of our colleagues from across the state.
Just to touch on that a little bit, that was a free, no cost to us other than travel expenses put on by the Secretary of State's office that brought basically all the governmental audit functions around the Northwest together. We had folks from Washington there,
Yeah, we presented.
California, I think, as well. So it was really great. They're hopefully going to continue it next year. It's supposed to be the first of many, hopefully. But pretty great that it was basically just put on by them. All we had to pay for was bringing board. So.
Nice.
The report includes just a chart of the amount of percent of our time that we spent on different activities over past 12 months compared to the past 3 months. The line on the top shows that in the past 12 months, we spent 56% of our time auditing, but if you look at just the past 3 months, it was 63%. So we've been able to focus more on our auditing in the past 3 months. That's all we've got.
Anything on the status report? Audit Committee Resources webpage.
Right, so this is something I put together, and Aaron, I'm gonna have to ask you to click links for me.
Go ahead.
So this is the Audit Committee resource page. So I've taken all of the information, like trainings and past meetings and who's on the committee, and put it all here. This is not a page that's linked publicly from our website, so it's kind of secret, and so I'll email you all the link, so because you won't be able to find it unless you have the link. So one of the things it has is we're in a bit of a transition on how we're storing our meeting minutes. So for older meeting minutes, so we'll click on that link. That's the upcoming.
Oh.
Oh, no, that's older. Okay, sorry, I can't see. Okay. So this is the older committee links. These meeting minutes going back to 2003. So if you ever want to take
Go to sleep sometime.
there you go.
March 2003, let's see where it all began.
So for newer meeting minutes, we're transitioning away from that area into linking directly to the county's page, to the meeting agendas page. So here, these are the ones that we have so far. But if you want to click actually on the June one, that's the one that's going to have the meeting minutes. So here you can see a video of the meeting if you missed it. The agenda is here. The newer agendas will also have links to supporting documents in them. And then if you click on
This one does.
yeah. So,
It's a bugs.
yeah. So that has some links to the slide decks. But if you go back to the other one, to the June one,
Sorry.
you go back and go to the under audit committee to the details tab. There you can also get the meeting minutes. And those go up once the minutes have been approved by the committee. So that's why they're not there for the September meeting, because we just approved the minutes, so they'll go up next time. So then there are also, just down towards the bottom, you can access our audit reports that we published. The code that's related to auditing is there. So like Commissioner Yvonne said, if you want to review the code and see if you're thinking about making any changes, that's there. We also have the slide decks that we use for orientation for new committee members are there. So if you ever want to go back through and refresh, that's a place to go. So I just want to let you all know that this was available to have hopefully like all of the information in one place. And I'll send the web address out to everyone.
That's good stuff. Good to have. Yeah.
All the new meeting materials we put to today's meeting materials are all
Yeah,
here.
today's materials are.
So the full packet in PDF form agenda.
Some of that's on the county website, some of it's not because of.
So, yeah, some of what's on the committee's page links to public documents, but you won't, public members won't be able to get to the whole page.
There aren't any issues as a result of that. It's anything being private that shouldn't be.
Well, it's not really private. It's, it's just that it's not easy to get to. And yeah, I think all of the information is mostly public information, so.
Yeah.
It's not secret or anything.
Yeah.
But one of the things is if we were to share, when we share audit reports early, I don't think we have the capability to do this yet, but sometimes we share audit reports with you before we make them public. So if we found a way to do that through here, that might be a reason to use this.
All right. Anything else on that? County updates.
I'm certainly happy to jump in, at least on one I've often, the last couple of years, spoken about the significant transitions we've had among department heads, and it finally feels like we have stability. With so many that have retired and a couple have moved on, and it's a great feeling of stability right now. Just this past year alone, and not that our treasurer's department head is still a key person, but we have had the treasurer, new district attorney, our internal auditor, solid waste directors transition. Those were just this getting others have occurred this calendar year. As we transition going forward, of course, we know that we have, as the sheriff has stated, he's not going to seek re-election, so that will be a department head in the future. But so that's kind of what I know of right now. And if there's anything else we need that I'm thinking about remembering there, I do just want to mention two things. One, this is not a department head, but it is related to an audit that you completed earlier, just this year, is that our IT department, our information technology department, is hiring a cybersecurity manager, which we think is really, really important for us in our operations going forward. And just given how important that is, just so you're aware of that. And then another piece that's somewhat related to some of the topics here is that for Board of County Commission approval, we've initiated an RFP, a request for proposals for a wage study to see who our comparable jurisdictions should be, and then based on that, how our wages compare to those comps, just given the changing dynamics in the entire wage world, labor world. So those are just a couple of updates that I have. I'm sorry. It doesn't include, it includes, thank you, it includes AFSCME, which is our largest union, which is about 570 employees, and it includes non-represented employees. And in part because we've recently completed our contracts that included a lot of wage adjustments already with our other represented employees across the county. 911 Sheriff's Office, Rural Innovation, Solid Waste and Road, and Wendy knows because she's been involved in I think every single one of them. She's spent a lot of time. So it's some big topics on the horizon, cybersecurity and wage and sure. Competitive. Wendy, anything else?
No, we're going to be reviewing proposals, assuming we're hopeful that we will receive them after today's conversation and a little bit presented, obviously a different scope of work, but in a few weeks we'll see where we're at there and forward with next steps. So exciting.
One new thing though has been Bill Kuhn. So whenever I talk about him, he comes back to the room. But anyway, it has been interesting having Bill with Robert. I feel like we're in such great hands. You know, he is new to who we're listening to. And he always gives us some incredible insight. In fact, the other day I'd ask about how many apartment buildings were done in Bend, because you know, you've just seen thousands of them or whatever, hundreds at least. And it came back that our vacancy in Bend is just a little under 9%. I think it's 8.6% of apartment buildings. And that they're actually considering not building as many this next year. That's for Brooks Resources. So that was information that he gave us. And no one seemed to really know that in the community. But it was from Brooks Resource.
Right. Anything else? Thanks.
Nothing else at this time. Thank you.
Thanks for that. One last time, committee.
That actually is just a link to a document that we sort of keep as a running list of updates and things you might be interested in. So you have an electronic copy of the document. See that.
Okay. That's it. Anything for the good of the cause before we adjourn?
One question, sort of, and it's kind of random one. There was an article in the newspaper a while ago about the sheriff's office and the spending, and then there's a website that was created by some individual, and there was talk about, and what does this committee have any role or thoughts or input in stuff when it comes to like that public kind of questioning of expenditures?
Well, let me just, and Robert, maybe you want to answer the question, but that is a good prompt. I did forget to mention, we do have our mid-year budget committee meeting
Right.
on Tuesday afternoon where we do review all of the departments, and it's a big picture review. But do you want to provide just a quick response about the sheriff's office? Because we're in regular coordination with sheriff's office as well as all of our departments on budgets and where they're at throughout the fiscal year.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Thanks for asking. Just overall first, we do provide monthly financial reports to the Board of County Commissioners, on a monthly basis. And we do go over most of the major funds, and we did talk about the sheriff's office in a public meeting as well. One of the things that in that article was talking about the difference between ending fund balance for fiscal year 23 and the beginning, the projection for the next fiscal year was off by $2 million. And that is an expanded version of my comment, and that was, that's not uncommon when there is a discrepancy because you're making an